The camera glides over crystal blue water rippling under moonlight. A woman's silhouette appears at an upstairs window, motionless, watching. Below, laughter echoes as shadows slip through her fence again. Her jaw tightens. She's counted every invasion, every violation, every lie. They think she's powerless. They think she'll never fight back. But tomorrow, everything changes. Because Claire Hendricks doesn't get mad anymore. She gets even. Claire Hendricks stood at her kitchen sink, hands submerged in lukewarm dishwater, staring through the window at the pool she'd saved 3 years to install. The water shimmered under the late afternoon sun, undisturbed except for a few leaves drifting across its surface. It looked peaceful, inviting, hers. Except it hadn't felt like hers in months. She dried her hands on a towel and walked outside, her sandals slapping against the stone pathway that wound through her carefully tended garden. The scent of jasmine hung in the air, mingling with the chlorine smell from the pool. She designed this backyard herself after the divorce, every plant chosen, every stone placed with intention. This was supposed to be her sanctuary. The gate at the side of her property stood slightly ajar. Claire's stomach dropped. She'd locked it that morning. She was certain of it. She approached slowly, heart hammering, and pushed the gate fully open. Fresh, wet footprints marked the concrete, leading from the pool back toward the fence line that separated her property from the Mitchell's house next door. Small footprints, teenage-sized. This was the 4th time this month. Claire closed her eyes and counted to 10, a technique her therapist had recommended for managing anger. It didn't work. The fury rose anyway, hot and sharp in her chest. She'd tried being reasonable. She'd tried being neighborly. 3 weeks ago, she'd knocked on the Mitchell's door with a plate of homemade cookies and a polite request to keep their kids out of her pool. Linda Mitchell had answered with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Oh, Claire, you're being dramatic. They're just kids having fun. It's summer." "It's trespassing," Claire had replied, keeping her voice level. "And it's dangerous. If one of them gets hurt, I'm liable." Linda had waved a dismissive hand. "They're excellent swimmers. Nothing's going to happen. Maybe you should just relax a little." The door had closed before Claire could respond. Now standing in her backyard with evidence of yet another violation, Claire felt something shift inside her. The part of her that wanted to be liked, to avoid conflict, to keep the peace, went quiet. What replaced it was colder, more calculating. She pulled out her phone and took photos of the footprints, the open gate, the wet patches on her pool deck. Then she walked the perimeter of her yard, checking for other signs of intrusion. Near the back corner, she found discarded soda cans and candy wrappers shoved into her hedge. Claire collected the trash carefully, using a paper bag from her recycling bin. Evidence. As she worked, she heard voices from the other side of the fence. Young voices, laughing. The Mitchells' twins, Blake and Madison, both 16. Their friends joined them most afternoons, a rotating cast of teenagers who treated the neighborhood like their personal playground. "Dude, that pool is sick," a male voice said. "We should hit it again tonight." "My mom said the neighbor lady is like obsessed," Madison replied. "She came over crying about us swimming." Claire's hands tightened on the bag. She hadn't been crying. She'd been calm, professional even. "Old people are so uptight," Blake added. "It's not like she even uses it." She was 37, hardly old, and she used the pool every morning for laps, a routine that helped manage the chronic pain from her car accident 2 years ago. Claire walked back to her house, locked the gate with a new padlock she'd purchased that morning, and sat at her kitchen table. She opened her laptop and began researching. By the time the sun set, she had a plan. The next morning, Claire drove to a security company downtown. The receptionist, a young woman with bright purple nails, looked up from her computer with a practiced smile. "How can I help you?" "I need cameras installed," Claire said. "Multiple angles, night vision, motion detection. I want to see everything that happens in my backyard." The receptionist's smile grew more genuine. Had some trouble with intruders. Something like that. An hour later, Claire had signed a contract for a comprehensive security system. The installation was scheduled for the following day. The cost made her wince, but she reminded herself this was an investment in safety, in boundaries, in peace of mind. On her way home, she stopped at a legal office. The consultation with Marcus Webb, a property attorney, cost her $200 in 45 minutes. "Your case is straightforward," Marcus said, leaning back in his leather chair. "Repeated trespassing, documented evidence, previous attempts at resolution. You have multiple options." He outlined them methodically. Restraining orders, small claims court for the cost of increased insurance and security measures, even criminal trespass charges if she wanted to push it that far. "What do you recommend?" Claire asked. "Depends on your goal. Do you want them punished or do you want them to stop?" "Both." Marcus smiled slightly. "Then we start with a cease and desist letter. Formal, legal, impossible to ignore. If they violate it, we escalate. But Claire, before we do this, you need to be prepared for your neighbors to hate you. They already trespassed on my property repeatedly and taught their children that my boundaries don't matter. I think we're past worrying about being friends." "Fair enough. I'll have the letter drafted by tomorrow." Claire left the office feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Action felt good. Progress felt better. That evening, she sat on her back porch with a glass of wine, watching the sunset paint her pool in shades of orange and gold. The new padlock gleamed on the gate. Tomorrow, the cameras would be installed. By the end of the week, the Mitchells would receive their cease and desist letter. She was done being the accommodating neighbor, done being dismissed, done being violated. The gate rattled. Claire set down her wine and walked quietly to the side of the house. Through the slats of the fence, she could see Blake Mitchell struggling with the padlock, trying to force it with what looked like a screwdriver. She pulled out her phone and started recording. "What are you doing?" she called out. Blake jumped, dropping the screwdriver. Through the fence, she saw his eyes go wide with panic before his expression hardened into teenage bravado. "Just checking if it was locked," he said. "With a screwdriver. I wasn't doing anything wrong. You're attempting to break into my property. That's several things wrong. Leave now or I'm calling the police." "God, you're such a—" He cut himself off, but the contempt in his voice finished the sentence. Claire didn't flinch. 5 seconds, 5-4. Blake left, but not before kicking her fence hard enough to rattle the boards. Claire stopped recording and immediately texted the video to herself, then to Marcus Webb. His reply came within minutes. "Perfect, this strengthens everything. Don't engage with them directly anymore. Document only." She went back to her porch, picked up her wine, and drank deeply. Her hands were shaking, adrenaline flooding her system. But beneath the fear, beneath the anger, was something else. Satisfaction. The security team arrived at 8 the next morning. 2 technicians, both professional and efficient, spent 6 hours installing cameras at every corner of her property, an upgraded system for her front door, and motion sensors along her fence line. "You'll get alerts on your phone whenever something triggers the sensors," the lead technician explained, walking Claire through the app. "And everything records to the cloud automatically. Can't be erased or tampered with." "Perfect." After they left, Claire tested the system, walking through her backyard and watching herself appear on her phone screen from multiple angles. The image quality was remarkable. Even in shadows, faces would be clearly visible. She felt safer already. That afternoon, Linda Mitchell appeared at her front door. Claire saw her through the new video doorbell camera before she even rang the bell. Linda's face was tight with anger, her posture rigid. Claire considered not answering. Then she remembered Marcus's advice to document everything. She opened the door but didn't invite Linda inside. Can I help you? What did you say to my son? Linda demanded. I told him to stop trying to break into my property. He wasn't breaking in, he was using a screwdriver to force my padlock. I have it on video. That Linda's face flushed. You're harassing my children. This has gone too far, Claire. They're just kids. Kids old enough to drive, old enough to understand that trespassing is illegal. We've lived next to each other for 4 years. We've been good neighbors, and you're going to destroy that over a few harmless swims. Claire felt her composure start to crack. She took a breath, steadying herself. Linda, I asked nicely, multiple times. Your family ignored every request. Your son tried to break my lock yesterday. Your children have been using my pool without permission for months. That's not being a good neighbor. That's theft of services at minimum, trespassing at worst. You're pathetic, Linda hissed. Sitting here alone in your big house, obsessing over your precious pool. My kids have friends, they have lives. What do you have? Cameras and locks and a stick-up your. This conversation is over. Claire stepped back and closed the door. Through the video doorbell, she watched Linda stand there for a moment, mouth working, before finally turning and storming back to her own house. Claire's whole body was trembling. She sat on her couch, head in her hands, trying to slow her breathing. She'd known it would be uncomfortable. She hadn't expected the venom. Her phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. Cease and desist letter is ready. Sending via certified mail today. They'll have it by Friday. Claire texted back, thank you. Then she pulled up the video doorbell footage and saved Linda's visit. Another piece of evidence, another layer of protection. Friday evening, Claire was reading on her porch when her phone exploded with motion alerts. She opened the app to see Blake, Madison, and 3 of their friends climbing over her back fence. Not trying the gate, not attempting to be subtle, just brazenly invading her property in broad daylight. Claire watched on her phone as they ran to her pool, stripping off shirts and shoes, laughing as they jumped into the water. One of them, a boy she didn't recognize, did a cannonball that sent water splashing across her carefully maintained deck. She dialed 911. I'd like to report a trespassing in progress, she said calmly. I have 5 teenagers in my pool without permission. I've asked them to leave multiple times over the past months, and today they climbed my fence to get in. The dispatcher took her information and promised to send an officer. Claire stayed on her porch, watching through her phone as the teenagers swam and played, completely unaware they were being recorded in high definition from 4 different angles. 12 minutes later, a police cruiser pulled up to her curb. Officer Ramirez was young, maybe late 20s, with a professional demeanor that immediately put Claire at ease. Ms. Hendricks, you reported a trespassing. Yes, they're still here, in my backyard. She led him around the side of the house. The moment the teenagers saw the uniform, the laughter died. They scrambled out of the pool, grabbing their belongings, stammering excuses. We were just. This is my friend's house. We didn't know. Everyone stay where you are, Officer Ramirez said firmly. He looked at Claire. Do you know these individuals? 2 of them are my neighbor's children, Blake and Madison Mitchell. The others I don't recognize. Officer Ramirez took down names and information from all 5 teenagers. Blake tried to argue, insisting they had implied permission, because Claire never explicitly told them not to swim. Claire pulled up her phone. I have video of your attempt to break my padlock 2 days ago. I have photos of footprints and trash from multiple intrusions. I have witnesses to me asking your parents directly to keep you off my property. Blake's face went pale. I also received a certified letter today, Linda Mitchell's voice called from beyond the fence. Claire turned to see both Linda and her husband, Roger, standing at their gate. A legal threat from this woman. This is harassment. Officer Ramirez held up a hand. Sir, ma'am, let me handle this. Ms. Hendricks, do you want to press charges? Claire had thought about this moment. She knew pressing charges would escalate everything to a point of no return, but she also knew that anything less would tell the Mitchells their actions had no real consequences. Yes, she said, I want to press charges for trespassing against all 5 of them. The teenagers erupted in protests. Linda started shouting about lawyers. Roger demanded to speak to Ramirez's supervisor. The officer remained calm. Ma'am, you have clear documentation, and these individuals are currently on your property without permission. You have every right to press charges. I'll need you to come to the station to file a formal report. I can do that tonight. Officer Ramirez issued citations to all 5 teenagers. When he got to Blake, the boy's hands were shaking as he took the paper. This is going on your record, Blake said to Claire, his voice breaking. You're ruining my life over a pool. No, Claire replied quietly. You made choices. This is the consequence. After the officer left and the teenagers scattered, Linda and Roger remained at the fence. Their faces held a mixture of rage and something else. Shock, maybe. The realization that their neighbor wasn't backing down. This isn't over, Linda said. You're right, Claire agreed. It's not. I'll see you in court. She went inside, locked her doors, and pulled all her curtains closed. Then she sat in the darkness of her living room and let herself cry. Not from sadness, from the sheer relief of finally standing up for herself. The social fallout began immediately. By Saturday morning, Claire noticed several neighbors crossing the street to avoid her during her morning run. At the grocery store, Corinne Priest, who lived 3 houses down and usually stopped to chat, turned her cart down a different aisle the moment she spotted Claire. That evening, someone spray-painted "bitch" across her driveway. Claire documented it with photos, filed a police report, and hired a pressure washing service to remove it. The cost came to $300. She added it to the growing file of expenses she planned to include in her small claims suit. Marcus called Monday morning. The Mitchells lawyered up. Craig Forrester. He's decent, but he's also the kind of attorney who likes to bully people into backing down. Expect him to come at you hard. I'm not backing down. Good, because I got a look at their response to the cease and desist. They're claiming you've been harassing their children, that you encouraged them to use the pool, and are now manufacturing evidence to frame them. Claire laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's absurd. It's a strategy. They're going to try to paint you as an unstable neighbor with a vendetta. But Claire, we have videos. We have timestamps. We have your documented attempts at peaceful resolution. They have nothing but their word. When is the court date? 3 weeks for the trespassing charges. I'm also filing the small claims suit this week for your security costs, the property damage, and increased insurance premiums. After they hung up, Claire sat in her home office, looking at the spreadsheet she'd created. Every incident documented, every expense tracked. She'd spent over $4,000 so far on security equipment, legal fees, and repairs. But it wasn't about the money, not really. It was about the principle, about boundaries, about teaching the Mitchell children that actions had consequences, even if their parents refused to. That afternoon, she got an email from the HOA. Someone had filed a complaint against her for creating a hostile environment and harassment of minor children. Claire printed the email, added it to her file, and drafted a response detailing every instance of trespassing, including dates, times, and photographic evidence. She CC'd her attorney. An hour later, Marcus called back. The HOA complaint isn't going anywhere. I spoke with their president. Once I mentioned the documented trespassing and your attempts at resolution, he backed off immediately. Actually said they'd support you if this goes to a hearing. Really? You're not the first person to have problems with the Mitchells. Apparently, their kids have a reputation. Most people just don't have your documentation skills. That evening, Claire was grilling dinner on her back porch when she heard voices from the Mitchell house. Loud voices, arguing. "This is your fault," Roger Mitchell shouted. "You told them it was fine. You said she wouldn't do anything." "How was I supposed to know she'd go psycho?" Linda fired back. "She never used that pool anyway." "She's pressing charges, Linda. Do you understand what this means for Blake's college applications? For Madison's scholarship opportunities? Don't you dare blame me. Those kids are your responsibility too." Claire turned off her grill and went inside. She didn't want to hear any more. But as she closed her door, she caught one last line from Roger. "We should have just respected her property. Too little, too late." The preliminary hearing for the trespassing charges was held in a windowless courtroom that smelled like floor polish and stale coffee. Claire arrived early with Marcus, who'd agreed to attend even though criminal proceedings weren't technically his specialty. "Moral support," he'd said, "and I want to see their faces when they realize you're serious." The Mitchells arrived 15 minutes late, trailing their attorney, Craig Forrester, a middle-aged man with styled hair and an expensive suit. Blake and Madison slouched behind them, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. The other three teenagers and their parents filled out the rest of the gallery. Claire recognized one set of parents, the Chens, who lived on the next block. Mrs. Chen wouldn't make eye contact with her. Judge Patricia Hawkins, a stern woman in her 60s, called the hearing to order. The prosecutor, a tired-looking public defender named Mills, presented the charges. 5 counts of trespassing, all on the same date, all captured on video. Forrester stood. "Your Honor, these charges are excessive and vindictive. My clients are teenagers who made a minor mistake in judgment. Ms. Hendricks is pursuing this matter out of spite, not legitimate concern." "Does Ms. Hendricks have evidence of the trespassing?" Judge Hawkins asked. Mills nodded. "Extensive evidence, Your Honor. Video footage from multiple angles, photos of property damage, records of previous incidents." "I'd like to see this footage." They played the video on a TV screen wheeled into the courtroom. The image was crystal clear. 5 teenagers climbing her fence, running to her pool, jumping in, swimming for nearly 20 minutes before Officer Ramirez arrived. Judge Hawkins watched without expression. When it ended, she looked at Forrester. "Counsel, that appears to be clear-cut trespassing." "Your Honor, Ms. Hendricks never posted no trespassing signs. My clients had no way of knowing." "A locked gate and a privacy fence are clear indicators that the property is private," Judge Hawkins interrupted. "Are your clients arguing they didn't know this was Ms. Hendricks's pool?" Blake started to speak, but Forrester held up a hand. "No, Your Honor." "Then the evidence supports the charges. However, given that these are first-time offenses for all 5 defendants, I'm willing to consider alternatives to criminal records." She outlined the terms. Each teenager would complete 40 hours of community service, attend a class on property rights and legal responsibility, and write formal apologies to Claire. If they completed everything within 90 days and stayed out of trouble, the charges would be expunged from their records. "However," Judge Hawkins added, her voice hardening, "if any of you appear before me again on similar charges, I will not be lenient. Ms. Hendricks has every right to feel safe on her property. You violated that. Accept the consequences and learn from them." The teenagers nodded, chastened. Blake was crying silently. Madison stared at the floor. Linda Mitchell stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. You're treating them like criminals over a swim." "Mrs. Mitchell, sit down," Judge Hawkins said coolly. "Your children trespassed repeatedly despite being asked to stop. The only reason they're not facing harsher consequences is that Ms. Hendricks appears to be reasonable, which is more than I can say for you based on the reports I've read." Linda sat, her face flushed. As they filed out of the courtroom, Roger Mitchell approached Claire in the hallway. Marcus tensed beside her, but Roger held up his hands in a peaceful gesture. "I wanted to apologize," he said quietly. "This never should have happened. We should have listened when you first asked. I'm sorry." Claire studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. She found only exhaustion and regret. "Thank you," she said. "I appreciate that." Roger nodded and walked away to join his family. Linda grabbed his arm, hissing something Claire couldn't hear, but Roger shook his head and kept walking. "Well," Marcus said, "that went as well as we could have hoped. Now we focus on the civil suit." The small claims court date was set for 6 weeks later. In the meantime, Claire tried to return to normal life. She swam her laps every morning. She tended her garden. She went to work at the marketing firm where she managed accounts, throwing herself into projects with renewed focus. But the neighborhood had changed, or maybe she had. People still avoided her. She heard whispers at the mailbox. Someone left a note on her windshield calling her a sad excuse for a neighbor. The HOA complaint had been withdrawn, but 3 other families on her street suddenly decided to sell their homes. Claire told herself she didn't care. She'd done the right thing. Boundaries mattered. Laws mattered. But late at night, lying alone in her bedroom, she wondered if the price of being right was worth the isolation. Her sister called one evening, having heard about the situation through the neighborhood grapevine. "Mom's worried about you," Jennifer said carefully. "She thinks maybe you're taking this too far." "Mom doesn't live here," Claire replied. "Mom didn't have teenagers treating her property like a public park." "I know, but Claire, criminal charges, lawsuits, don't you think that's a bit extreme?" "They climbed my fence, Jen, after I'd asked them repeatedly to stop, after I'd locked the gate, after I'd done everything short of building a wall. What was I supposed to do, just accept it? Maybe talk to them again." "I did talk to them. Multiple times they didn't care, and their parents encouraged it." Jennifer sighed. "I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying I'm worried about you. You sound so angry all the time now." "I'm not angry. I'm done being a doormat." After they hung up, Claire poured herself a glass of wine and sat on her back porch. The pool lights cast wavering patterns across the water, peaceful, beautiful, hers. She'd fought for this. She'd stood up for herself, so why did it feel so hollow? Her phone buzzed with emotion alert. Claire's stomach clenched, but when she checked the camera, it was just a raccoon waddling along her fence line. She laughed at herself, jumpy over wildlife. But the truth was, she felt constantly on edge now, hyper-aware of every sound, every movement near her property. The security system that was supposed to bring peace of mind had instead made her more paranoid. Was this victory, this constant vigilance, this isolation? Claire pushed the thoughts away. She'd made her choice. She'd follow through. And eventually things would settle. They had to. The night before the small claims hearing, Claire couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, mentally rehearsing her testimony. Marcus had prepared her well. They had every piece of documentation organized, every expense justified with receipts and invoices. The Mitchells owed her $6,847.32 for security equipment, legal fees, property damage repairs, increased insurance premiums, and the cost of pressure washing the graffiti from her driveway. It should be straightforward. The evidence was clear. But Claire had learned over the past months that nothing involving the Mitchells was ever straightforward. At 3 in the morning, her motion sensors went off. Claire grabbed her phone, heart racing, and pulled up the camera feeds. Someone was standing at her front door. Not trying to break in, just standing there, facing the camera directly. The image was clear enough that Claire could see it was Blake Mitchell. He looked directly into the lens for a long moment, his expression unreadable, then walked away. Claire watched him cross her lawn and disappear into the darkness. She should have called the police. He was technically trespassing just by being on her property, but something about his body language, the way he just stood there, stopped her. She saved the footage anyway. The next morning, exhausted and jittery from too much coffee, Claire met Marcus at the courthouse. The small claims court was less formal than the criminal hearing, held in a converted office space with folding chairs instead of proper benches. The Mitchells were already there, sitting with Craig Forrester. Linda looked like she hadn't slept either. Roger stared at his hands. Blake and Madison weren't present, which made sense. This was a civil matter between adults. Judge Thomas Reeves, a jovial-looking man who seemed too cheerful for the setting, called them to order. Claire presented her case first. She walked through the timeline methodically, showing photos, videos, receipts. She explained each expense, justified each charge. She was calm, professional, factual. When she mentioned the spray-painted driveway, Judge Reeves frowned. "Do you have evidence linking the Mitchells to this vandalism?" "No, Your Honor, but it occurred the morning after I pressed trespassing charges against their children." "That's speculation," Forrester interjected. "There's no proof my clients had anything to do with that incident." "True," Marcus countered, "but the timing is suspicious, and Ms. Hendricks is entitled to recover costs related to the ongoing harassment she's experienced." "I'll allow it," Judge Reeves decided. "Continue, Ms. Hendricks." When Claire finished, Forrester presented the Mitchells' defense. They argued that Claire's security measures were excessive, that she'd installed the system for personal reasons unrelated to the trespassing, and that she couldn't prove the increased insurance premiums were solely due to their children's actions. "Furthermore," Forrester said, his voice taking on a sympathetic tone, "my clients are a hardworking family facing financial strain due to Ms. Hendricks's vindictive pursuit of criminal charges against their children. Blake Mitchell has lost a scholarship opportunity due to the charges on his record. Madison has been asked to step down from her position as student council president. These consequences far exceed the minor inconvenience of a few teenagers using a pool." Claire felt her temper spike. Marcus touched her arm gently, a reminder to stay calm. Judge Reeves looked at the Mitchells. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, did you encourage your children to stop trespassing after Ms. Hendricks first requested it?" Linda and Roger exchanged glances. "We didn't think it was a big deal," Linda finally said. "Did you instruct them to stop?" "Not explicitly, no." "Did you apologize to Ms. Hendricks for your children's behavior?" Silence. "I'll take that as a no," Judge Reeves said. "Here's my assessment. Ms. Hendricks made reasonable requests that were ignored. She took reasonable steps to secure her property. The costs she incurred are directly related to your family's repeated trespassing. As for the consequences your children are facing, those are the natural results of their choices and your failure to parent effectively." Linda started to protest, but Judge Reeves held up a hand. "I'm awarding Ms. Hendricks the full amount requested, $6,847.32, to be paid within 60 days. If you fail to pay, Ms. Hendricks can pursue wage garnishment or liens against your property. Case closed." He banged his gavel. Claire sat very still, letting the moment sink in. She'd won, completely. The system had validated every choice she'd made. So why didn't she feel better? As they left the courtroom, Linda stopped in front of Claire. Her eyes were red, her face blotchy. "I hope you're happy," she said quietly. "You've destroyed my family over a pool." "No," Claire replied, her voice equally quiet. "You destroyed your relationship with me by teaching your children that rules don't apply to them. I just refuse to accept that lesson." Linda walked away without another word. Outside, Marcus shook Claire's hand. "Congratulations, you handled that perfectly." "Thanks, send me your final bill." "Will do, and Claire, for what it's worth, you did the right thing. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but you did." Claire drove home, parked in her driveway, and sat in her car for a long time. The house looked the same. The pool sparkled in the afternoon sun. Everything was as it should be. But she felt different, Harder, colder. Was this who she wanted to be? The woman who took her neighbors to court, the person everyone avoided. She'd fought for her boundaries, she'd stood up for herself, she'd won. But winning felt a lot like losing. The 60 days passed slowly. Claire received a check from the Mitchells, delivered by their attorney with no note, no apology, nothing personal, just a certified check for the full amount. She deposited it and tried to move on. The community service hours were completed. The apology letters arrived, all 5 of them, handwritten and surprisingly thoughtful. Blake's letter was the longest. "Dear Ms. Hendricks, I know you probably won't believe this, but I really am sorry. I thought it was no big deal because my mom said it was fine. I didn't think about how it was your property or how you might feel about us using it without asking. I definitely shouldn't have tried to break your lock. That was really stupid. I've learned a lot from this whole thing, mostly that actions have consequences and you can't just do whatever you want because you think it's okay. I'm sorry for all the trouble I caused. Blake Mitchell." Claire read it 3 times looking for sarcasm or insincerity. She found none. It seemed genuine. She filed all 5 letters in her documentation folder and tried not to think about what could have happened if she just invited the kids to swim properly, with rules and supervision. But no, she shut down that thought. This wasn't her fault. She'd tried the friendly approach first. They'd rejected it. Autumn arrived, bringing cooler temperatures and the smell of wood smoke. Claire's pool sat unused now, covered for the season. She'd stopped swimming her morning laps weeks ago, though she couldn't articulate why. The neighborhood dynamics had shifted in subtle ways. The families who'd avoided her were now cordial again, as if the court's ruling had given them permission to acknowledge her. The Mitchells had put their house on the market. Claire heard about it from Corinne Priest, who'd resumed their grocery store chats. "They're moving," Corinne said, shaking her head. "Linda told me they just can't handle living next to you anymore. Too uncomfortable." "That's their choice," Claire said. "I suppose. But Claire, between you and me, I think you were right to do what you did. My son is friends with Blake, and that boy had no sense of boundaries. Maybe this taught him something important." It was the first time anyone had openly supported her decision. Claire felt a lump in her throat. "Thank you for saying that. Takes courage to stand up for yourself. Not everyone can do it." After Corinne left, Claire stood in the produce section for a long moment, holding a bag of apples, trying not to cry. She'd been so focused on being right, on fighting, on winning, that she'd forgotten what it felt like to be understood. The "for sale" sign went up in October. Claire watched from her window as the real estate agent hammered it into the Mitchells' front lawn. Linda supervised, arms crossed, face set in hard lines. Roger loaded boxes into their truck with mechanical efficiency. Blake and Madison were nowhere to be seen. Part of Claire wanted to feel triumphant. They were leaving. She'd won so completely that her adversaries were fleeing the battlefield. But mostly she felt tired. That evening, as Claire was pulling weeds from her garden, she heard footsteps on her driveway. She looked up to see Blake Mitchell standing at the edge of her property, hands shoved in his pockets. "Can I talk to you?" he asked. Claire stood slowly brushing dirt from her knees. Every instinct screamed caution. Document this. Record this. Protect yourself. But Blake looked so young standing there, shoulders hunched, eyes downcast. Just a kid who'd made mistakes. "Okay," she said. "I'm not supposed to be here," Blake started. "My mom would kill me if she knew, but I wanted to say I'm sorry again. Like, really sorry, not just because the court made me write that letter. I got your letter, it seemed sincere." "It was. Look, I know I was a jerk. We all were. And my mom made it worse by acting like what we did was no big deal. But it was a big deal. It was your stuff, your property, and we just took it without asking. That's theft, basically." Claire felt her guard lowering despite herself. "What changed your mind? The court ruling?" "Partly, but also community service. They had me working at a food bank and there was this lady there who'd been robbed. Like, someone broke into her house and took everything. And she was telling me how violated she felt, how it wasn't just about the stuff but about feeling safe in her own home. And I realized that's probably how you felt, like we'd stolen your sense of safety. That's remarkably insightful. Blake shrugged. My therapist helped me figure it out. My parents made me start going after all this happened. Anyway, I just wanted you to know that I get it now, and I'm sorry, for real. Thank you, Blake, that means something. He nodded, then turned to leave, but he paused and looked back. My mom's never going to apologize. She thinks she's right and you're just mean. But my dad gets it. He told me we should have respected your property from the start. He's pretty mad at my mom about the whole thing. Blake, you don't need to. I know. I just thought you should know that not all of us think you're the bad guy here, even if it doesn't feel like it. After he left, Claire sat on her porch steps, staring at the sunset. Blake's words circled in her mind. She hadn't been trying to be the bad guy. She'd just been trying to protect what was hers. But she wondered, not for the first time, if there had been a middle path she'd missed. Something between being a doormat and being the neighborhood villain. Maybe there hadn't been. Maybe the Mitchells had forced her hand. Or maybe she'd been so hurt by their initial dismissal that she'd escalated when she could have de-escalated. She didn't know anymore. The Mitchells' house sold quickly. A young couple with a toddler, both doctors at the local hospital. They introduced themselves the day they moved in, bringing a bottle of wine and warm smiles. I'm Priya, the woman said. This is my husband, James, and this little troublemaker is Evan. The toddler waved shyly from behind his father's leg. Claire, welcome to the neighborhood. We heard there was some drama with the previous owners, James said carefully. But our realtor said it was resolved. We just want you to know we believe in being good neighbors. I appreciate that, Claire said. Also, Priya added, we noticed your beautiful pool. If you ever want to share it, we'd love to set up a time. We'd pay for half the maintenance and chemicals, of course. Evan starting swim lessons and practicing at home would be wonderful. Claire felt something unexpected, hope. Let me think about that, she said, but I'm not opposed to the idea. No pressure, just wanted to put it out there. We'll see you around. After they left, Claire stood in her doorway for a long time. A standing offer, not a demand, not an assumption, just a respectful request with clear terms and boundaries. This was what she'd wanted all along. This was how neighbors should behave. Winter arrived, bringing frost and early darkness. Claire's pool sat frozen under its cover, a blue rectangle of dormant possibility. She thought about Priya's offer almost every day. On Christmas Eve, she knocked on their door with a tin of homemade cookies and a proposition. I've been thinking about your offer, she told Priya. I'd like to set up a schedule for next summer, designated days and times, rules for safety and cleanliness, if you're still interested. Priya's face lit up. Absolutely, that sounds perfect. They spent an hour at Claire's kitchen table drafting an agreement. Nothing legally binding, just clear expectations, days and times, safety rules, maintenance responsibilities, emergency procedures. It felt good, collaborative, respectful. Can I ask what happened with the previous owners? Priya said as they finished. You don't have to answer, I'm just curious. Claire considered lying, glossing over it. But these were her new neighbors and they deserved honesty. They let their kids use my pool without asking. When I requested they stop, they ignored me. It escalated from there. That's terrible. Some people really don't understand boundaries. No, they don't. But I learned something important. Standing up for yourself is necessary, but so is being willing to compromise when people treat you with respect. Priya smiled. I think we're going to be good neighbors. I think so too. Spring came slowly, bringing rain and green shoots pushing through the winter-dead garden. Claire opened her pool in March, earlier than usual, eager to reclaim the routine she'd lost. Her first morning swim felt like a baptism. The water was cold, shocking, perfect. She did her laps with renewed purpose.